Good morning. We are talking about the Sermon on the Mount, and Jesus has actually given us these two titles, which are part of our mission: that we're to be salt in the world, and we are to be light. And he addresses then in the Sermon on the Mount what makes us not salty, or makes our salt not salty, and what hides our light. And he addresses how we handle our anger, and this is all kind of dealing with hypocrisy, how we handle lust and divorce and oath keeping, keeping our word. And yesterday we talked about how Jesus is saying no more retaliation, no more hatred. My people are not like that. We're peacemakers. That's my investment in you. That's your investment in the world around you. That's how you are salt and you're light. And so he addresses those things for us. But I think it's important to say, and actually several people came up to me afterwards and said, but what about, and they had a number of different scenarios. And I want to be able to say, at the top of this week, that it's important to say that Jesus is laying down principles in this passage, in this part of the Sermon on the Mount. He's laying down principles. So, he actually talked about divorce, and he uses 1.5 sentences to talk about divorce. And for us, it's a lot more complex. There's a lot more nuance to that. Jesus picks it up, and Matthew writes it down in chapter 19 of his gospel. And Jesus actually deals a bit more thoroughly with those themes that he introduced about divorce there. Then the apostles had to figure out, how do we apply that in real world scenarios, which is the same thing we have to. So the apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 6 and 7, he talks about this idea of, well, what about, we found this situation in our mission churches when a wife comes to Christ, but her husband doesn't. He doesn't want anything to do with her. He wants to divorce her. Paul says it's okay. That we actually have to wrestle these things through. We have to wrestle with the nuances and the particularities of our different life circumstances. And so, in one of those, it might be that you need to actually go the second mile with somebody. You need to be able to be merciful and patient, but you also need to speak the truth. You need to call them out. You need to be honest and say, you've broken my trust in this. And so, I'm not, going to allow you to use me, and yet I want to be able to love you well and to move with you in this. And so there is nuance in this. We'll talk about some of the nuances in these days ahead, but it's important to say that Jesus is laying down the overall principles, and we are now having to filter those into our lives in the nuance stage. So that's our thought for today. Be thinking about that as we talk about it this week. Thanks for joining me. God bless you.